now we'll learn about the midbrain. The midbrain is the upper part of the brainstem. Okay. The specific learning objectives as prescribed by the National Medical Council of India in the competency based medical education curriculum is that a student should be able to identify the external and the internal features of the midbrain. Okay, and in the internal features of the midbrain, you need to know what is happening at the level of the superior colliculus and what is happening at the level of the inferior colliculus. Okay, so these are the things that are expected from a student according to the CBME guideline. Now, the midbrain in an anterior view is kind of difficult to identify in a brain specimen, okay, unless the cerebrum is removed, unless you kind of disintegrate and cut the brain. It is very difficult to show the midbrain, especially if the blood vessels are around it. So if you look at this image, in this image actually the midbrain, it is easy to identify the medulla. This is the medulla. Okay, I'll use another color. This is the medulla, this is the pons, and above that you are supposed to see the midbrain, but the midbrain is only this much part. Okay, you can see these two structures, that is, they are the crus cerebri, the cerebral peduncles of the midbrain, and in between that you can see the interpeduncular fossa. Okay, this region is called the interpeduncular fossa. So that is a region, this region is kind of a little obscure when you look at the brain in situ. So it is difficult in an intact brain to correctly show the midbrain position, but it is in the most upper part, the part that I have labeled as blue. That region is the midbrain, and between that, this region is the interpeduncular fossa. That region is actually part of the diencephalon. That is the only part of the diencephalon that you can see in an intact brain. So the visualization of the midbrain in an intact brain specimen is a little bit difficult if you compare with what you see in the medulla or the pons. It is easily visualizable. All right. If you turn around and if you remove the if you remove the cerebellum and you expose very clearly the brainstem from the posterior aspect, that is called the dorsal view. In the dorsal view, as you can see in this image, the cerebellum is removed. The cerebellum is cut by by incising the cerebellar peduncles, and if that is removed, you can see the floor of the fourth ventricle very clearly here, the rhomboid fossa that we mentioned before. Above that, you will be having the midbrain. So this much part is the midbrain. Okay. The midbrain is very clearly seen on the posterior aspect by identifying these four elevations. These four elevations are called the corpora quadrigemina. The corpora quadrigemina is also called as the colliculi, the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. It looks like four bumps on the posterior aspect of the brain. Two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculi. If you remember the competency, you are actually supposed to learn what happens at the level of the superior colliculus and what happens at the level of the inferior colliculus. So that is how we mention the different levels of the midbrain. So as I said before, since the midbrain is difficult to visualize, the easiest way to learn about the midbrain is to cut through the level of the midbrain and look at that. Okay, so this is a cut section, and what you are seeing here is, let me get you oriented. This is the anterior aspect and this is the posterior aspect. These two structures that you see here, okay, these two structures that you see here were the structures that you visualized earlier in this picture. The two blue structures that were flanking on both sides. I told you about these two blue structures, this and this. They are called the cerebral peduncles or the crus cerebri. Okay, that part is what you are seeing here. Okay, this technically speaking, this is called crus cerebri. This is part of the cerebral peduncle as a whole. That is called, that is what you are seeing here in this section. This is the anterior aspect. So this part in between the two peduncles is called the interpeduncular fossa. Interpeduncular fossa. That is the part that we visualized earlier, which contained a little part of diencephalon, especially the mammillary bodies. So those were the structures that you see in the anterior aspect. If you look at the posterior aspect, you can see two elevations over here. So they will be the colliculi. Okay, this looks like a section of the upper part of the midbrain, so that will be the superior colliculus. So this is how we learn about the midbrain. You look at the anterior view, you look at the posterior view, and you take a section. Now sectional anatomy, as you know, every brainstem structure you learn the external appearance as well as the internal appearance by taking sections. So this is an appearance of the section of the midbrain. Here in this picture it is oriented reverse to the previous picture. So let me just get that orientation right for you. This is anterior. Okay, we will always identify the anterior and posterior of the midbrain by identifying these two structures. That will be the cerebral peduncles. So if I identify cerebral peduncles, that is the anterior side. So this will be the technically the interpeduncular fossa, and on the posterior aspect you can see the colliculi. So that will be the posterior aspect. That will be the colliculi. So this is a section of the upper part of the midbrain. That is a section through the superior colliculus. In the superior colliculus section, you can see the crus cerebri anteriorly. Posteriorly you can see the superior colliculus, and here within this part is called as the tegmentum. Okay, this much part is called the tegmentum of the midbrain. The posterior aspect where you have the colliculi, that part is called as the tectum. Okay, tegmentum is only till here. Sorry, the tegmentum is only till here. The posterior aspect, that much part is called as the tectum. Now, between this tegmental part, this is the tegmental part. Between that tegmental part and the crus cerebri, this much region is what is called as the substantia nigra. So substantia nigra is kind of sandwiched between the crus cerebri anteriorly and the tegmentum posteriorly, and together the crus cerebri plus the substantia nigra plus the tegmentum is together technically what is called as a cerebral peduncle. So cerebral peduncle and the crus cerebri are not the same if you consider the anatomical terms. The cerebral peduncle is the crus cerebri plus the substantia nigra plus the tegmentum. Together you call it as the cerebral peduncle. Now cerebral peduncle and the tectum is separated by this tunnel that goes through it, and that tunnel is the aqueduct of Sylvius. If you remember the ventricular system sessions that we learned, in the ventricular system I told you about a tunnel that drills through the midbrain, and that tunnel is called the aqueduct of Sylvius, which was connecting the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. So that is that tunnel. That tunnel is going through the midbrain, dividing it in an anterior cerebral peduncle and a posterior tectum. Okay. So in this appearance it is also important to notice one structure, and this structure is called the red nucleus. The red nucleus is located at the level of the superior colliculus. Now let me clarify one more point. At the level of the superior colliculus you have the third nerve nucleus. Okay, third nerve nucleus. Here it is shown, oculomotor nucleus and the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. They are the third cranial nerve nucleus. Third cranial nerve nucleus is located at the level of superior colliculus. If you compare it with the level of the inferior colliculus, everything is similar. Okay, you have an aqueduct of Sylvius that is dividing it into a cerebral peduncle anteriorly and a tectum posteriorly. And in the cerebral peduncle you have a tegmentum over here, you have a substantia nigra over here, and you have a crus cerebri over here. All of these things are similar. The only difference from the superior colliculus level is that you don't have a red nucleus. Okay, there is no red nucleus, and instead of the oculomotor nucleus, here you have a trochlear nucleus. Trochlear nucleus is cranial nerve number 4. Cranial nerve number 4. So cranial nerve number 3 is the upper level nucleus that is seen in the upper level of the midbrain. Cranial nerve number 4 nucleus is seen at the lower level. Okay, this is the basic understanding about the midbrain external appearance and the sections. Now we will have a look at these same structures in a 3D perspective using the 3D tool called AnaView. Alright, now we are seeing the same midbrain in the AnaView tool. As you can see, here is the 3D viewport, and on that side of the screen you can see 3 sectional images. I'll just move this. This is a lateral view. You can identify the brainstem here. This will be the cerebellum. You can see the outline of the cerebellum in the scans. Okay, that is the cerebellum, and this huge structure is the cerebral. This is the cerebral cortex and the cerebral white matter. So you can orient this very clearly now. Let us first look at the anterior view of the brainstem. Okay, I'll move this downwards to make it clear. You can identify the medulla on the lower aspect. You can identify the pons here above that, and you can identify the midbrain above that. So that is the midbrain that you can see. As I told before, midbrain is very difficult to visualize in an anterior view if the brain is intact in an anatomy specimen. But here you can see very clearly the anterior view of the midbrain with the 2 cerebral peduncles flanking on both sides. In between this is the interpeduncular fossa. So this is the appearance that you see. I'll just remove this planes for a while. This is the appearance that you will see, the 2 cerebral peduncles on both sides the two cerebral peduncles on both sides are those are what you see here, and between that you will have the interpeduncular fossa. This interpeduncular fossa, if you look from the lower aspect like this, like you hold a brain and look at its ventral aspect like that, if you look like that, then that is called the interpeduncular fossa. That is the location where you have the mammillary bodies projecting out, and in front you will have the optic chiasma. All these structures will be seen in this interpeduncular fossa. It's a very important region because this is a region where the circle of Willis also, the posterior aspect of the circle of Willis is also located there, because the basilar artery will be coming up here and it will be diverging into the two posterior cerebrals at that point. So this is a very clinically important area. So that is the let me just get the orientation correct. Yeah. Now that is the anterior view of the midbrain. Now if I turn on the lateral side, you can see the lateral side. Now I am turning back to the posterior side. I'll move this coronal image to the front. Okay. Now here you can see very clearly the posterior aspect of the brainstem. The cerebellum is removed. The cerebellum is removed, and you are looking at the posterior aspect of the brainstem. As you saw in the previous image, this is the rhomboid fossa, or the floor of the fourth ventricle, containing all the features of the floor of the fourth ventricle. And above that you can see the midbrain level with 4 elevations. This 4 elevations is very clearly seen if you turn it around. Okay, turn it around. In a single view it is not appreciable, but if you turn it around you can see 4 bumps, the lower 2 bumps and the upper 2 bumps. It is called the tectal plate or the corpora quadrigemina. Quadri means 4, corpora means bodies. So you can see the corpora quadrigemina on the posterior aspect, yeah, the upper 2 elevations are called the superior colliculi, and the lower 2 elevations are called the inferior colliculi. Okay, so that is what you are seeing over there. All right, now I'll turn to the sectional view to make the sectional view more clear. You can have an appearance, you can correlate what you see on the 3D viewport and what you see in the sectional view. You can see in the front there is crus cerebri. This is crus cerebri. Crus cerebri is actually formed by descending tracts. Okay, they are formed by descending tracts that are going downwards. They occupy the corticospinal and the corticobulbar tracts, and also the frontopontine fibers. All of them will be the corticopontine fibers, which includes the frontopontine, paritopontine, temporopontine, and the occipitopontine. All of these fibers that are descending down are going through this crus cerebri. It's a very, very clinically, highly critically important area of the midbrain, because it contains descending tracts. Now in between this and this structure, this is called the tegmentum of the midbrain. I mentioned about the tegmentum, and between the tegmentum and the crus cerebri you can see the substantia nigra. I'll take this tegmentum and I'll reduce its opacity to make the substantia nigra clearer. You can see how the substantia nigra, the brown colored structure, is sandwiched between the crus cerebri in front and the tegmentum behind. Okay, it's very clearly seen. Now I'll bring back that opacity back, and I want you to appreciate this tunnel. Can you see that tunnel that is going? I'll just remove the planes for a while and I'll look at the 3D model alone. Look at the 3D model alone and turn it around, and you can see this tunnel. Okay, that tunnel is actually communicating the fourth ventricle. This was the fourth ventricle. That fourth ventricle is being communicated through that tunnel. Okay, that was that tunnel. I'm looking end on through that tunnel. That tunnel is actually drilling through the midbrain, and it is coming up and opening up into the third ventricle. Okay, so that is dividing the midbrain into 2 parts. The posterior part is the tectal plate or the corpora quadrigemina or the tectum, and the anterior part is the cerebral peduncle, which contains the tegmentum, the substantia nigra, as well as the crus cerebri. So this makes understanding the anterior view, the posterior view, and the sections all together in one platform itself. It makes us learn the same structure through different perspectives with so much of flexibility, where you can move around and you can play with this and you can learn along with that. Alright, now what we are going to do next is I'm going to take the corpora quadrigemina. Okay, I'm to take the corpora quadrigemina and I'm going to reduce its opacity. So you can see that the superior colliculus is containing the nucleus of the superior colliculus. This structure is actually the nucleus of the superior colliculus, which is causing that elevation. The elevation is called the superior colliculus, but inside that you have a nucleus. This nucleus and this inferior nucleus are important in a couple of neural pathways. For example, superior colliculus is important in visual reflexes. It is not part of the direct visual pathway, but it is important for visual reflexes. The inferior colliculus, on the other hand, is important for in the auditory pathway. It is a station in the auditory pathway, the inferior colliculus. Okay, so both of them are kind of important structures in the tectal plate. So you can now see the aqueductus sylvius creating that groove on that tegmentum anteriorly. Okay, that is very clearly visualized now. So I'll take the tectum, I'll remove the tectum completely. I'll take the superior colliculus also, I'll remove it. I'll take the inferior colliculus and I remove it. Okay. Now if I take the tegmentum and if I reduce the opacity of that tegmentum, if I reduce the opacity of the tegmentum, you can see a couple of nuclei inside the tegmentum. Okay, to visualize it better, I am going to hide the crus cerebri as well as the substantia nigra. I have already mentioned about that. I am hiding all those things. And you can see that this nucleus is the red nucleus. This is the midbrain red nucleus. What you see here is the red nucleus. What you see here is the oculomotor nucleus. All of these things can be clear if I remove the tegmentum and I click on it. You can see it is a red nucleus. Okay, this structure is a red nucleus, and this structure will be the oculomotor nucleus. The oculomotor nucleus is located at the level of the red nucleus. It is located at the level of the red nucleus, right? Now I can confirm that it is at the level of superior colliculus by bringing it back. You can understand that it is all in the same level. The superior colliculus, the oculomotor nucleus and the red nucleus are all at the same level in the upper part of the midbrain. In contrast, the inferior colliculus and the trochlear nerve nucleus are located in the lower level of the brainstem. So all of this is very clearly seen. This is the tegmentum, and yeah, this is the tectum. So I've brought in the tegmentum and the tectum with reduced opacity, and through this glass appearance you can see the superior colliculus, the red nucleus and the oculomotor nucleus is at the same level in the upper part, and the inferior colliculus and the trochlear nucleus is in the same level in the lower part. Okay, all these nuclei are very important. If you have a lesion in the upper part of the midbrain, it can affect the oculomotor nucleus. If you have a lesion in the lower part of the midbrain, it can affect the trochlear nucleus. So all these points are kind of important, and you can now correlate what you see in the outside in the 3D viewport with what you see in the sectional anatomy. Now, as we did in the medulla class, we will go through this axial sections. Among all these three sections, the axial section is kind of important because it will help us learn the anatomy very, very clearly. So I'll bring this axial section upwards into this brainstem, okay, into this midbrain. You need to have a look at this midbrain, how it appears in an axial section. You can see the tegmentum here. The tegmentum is having this, this appearance, this light blue appearance is what you see in the tegmentum here. This is the tectum. The tectum is having this appearance. Okay, that is the tectum, and this is the tegmentum, and you can see the aqueduct in between. So I am removing these colors, and I want you to appreciate the tegmentum and the tectum in this MRI image. In this MRI image, finally you need to understand the midbrain in an MR image. Okay, you need to understand the radiological anatomy, not just the anatomy in the specimen, but you need to understand how it will appear in scans, because that will be how you will be seeing this anatomy later in your career. So this is the aqueduct. You can see the aqueduct as a black hole over there. That is through it is allowing the passage of the CSF. CSF is not having any signal in this MRI image. That is why you are seeing the aqueduct there. Posteriorly, you can see the colliculi. That is the tectal plate. Anteriorly, you have the tegmentum. So I'm bringing back the colors here, and you can correlate that. Now in front of that you can see the substantia nigra. I'll just bring back the substantia nigra over here. That is the substantia nigra, and in front of that you will have the midbrain crus cerebri. Let me bring back the midbrain crus cerebri over here. Yeah, this is the midbrain crus cerebri. So you can see the midbrain crus cerebri over here. Did you understand how it appears in a 3D model and how it appears in a sectional image? In the sectional image, if you look, it almost looks like the Mickey Mouse ear. Okay, that ears are actually the crus cerebri. If I bring back the colors, that ears are the crus cerebri. Here, this jaw is formed by the colliculi that is seen on the posterior aspect, and the crus cerebri is seen on the anterior aspect. This appearance is what you see in an MR image. So in an MR image, you can now identify the midbrain, you can identify the crus cerebri, you can identify the aqueduct, the tegmentum, and the tectal plate, and you can scroll around to identify any of these sections, and you can bring back the color to understand which part of the brainstem it is, what is the section through which it is going, and you can correlate the nuclei that are present inside it. Okay. So this tool gives you the flexibility to understand the same structure through different perspectives and enhance your learning. Okay, thank you.